start. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Liftoff of the space.
In our natural pursuit of knowledge, space has always mystified and beguiled us. Over the past 5 decades, we've pushed the final frontier inevitably onward into the ether. The cost has been colossal. Now every day, new data, new conclusions, and the thirst for deeper exploration propel us inexorably onward. The advantages of the discoveries made through space travel are myriad, but the fundamental curiosity as to what is out there will always fascinate and taunt us. Come with us now into the unknown and discover the disappearing frontier. In today's program, our feature story deals with weightlessness and some of the inherent problems it causes and how we confront them in space exploration. Before we could overcome weightlessness, we had to find a way on Earth that we could create it. We'll take you below the surface of a massive pool where prospective astronauts train before shuttle flights take them to board the International Space Station. We'll also be taking a global view of our planet from the space shuttle, picking out some landmarks which make it a little easier to understand why things on the moon, for instance, aren't always as they seem. And in our gadget segment, a device that takes a photographic journey to the floor of a volcano and back. When we first went into space, no one knew how the human body would react to spaceflight. We wondered if we could survive in weightlessness, and we wondered if we could work in space. Over 30 years later, we know that the answer to both of these questions is yes. The human body is a very complex piece of machinery, which, like the shuttle, relies on several subsystems to perform its functions. All of our bodies are affected to some degree by spaceflight. The most dramatic change occurs immediately after we become weightless. On Earth, gravity pulls our body fluids, our feet and legs and abdomen. But when we enter space, the fluid in our body is no longer pulled down towards our feet, but shifts up to our chest and head. Since 80% of our body is fluid, that changes the way we look. Our faces get puffy and our legs become skinny. We call this the bird legs of space. After a period, the astronauts adapt somewhat to the fluid shift. Their bodies, however, remain in this altered state until they're back on Earth. Everyday activities, though, become just that on board the shuttle. However, there are other jobs to be accomplished whilst taking this incredible journey. The crew members of STS-40 Spacelab Life Sciences 1 studied the heart and the way it functions in space. Our cardiovascular system works well in gravity. No matter whether we're standing or lying, we always have sufficient blood supply to the brain and other vital organs. But when we go into space and take our hearts out of their normal environment, some strange things happen. The upward shift of fluid in the body tricks the heart and its senses into believing that there's an increased blood supply. So the heart tries to compensate. First, the muscular structure of the heart compensates by stretching so that the heart can hold more blood. When this happens, other body systems tell the kidneys to eliminate what appears to be excess fluid. Returning to Earth from space, gravity pulls much of our blood again back to our legs. Now there's not enough blood to go around, and some people experience a feeling of lightheadedness until the body gets more fluid and manufactures more blood. Before departing Earth, astronaut Drew Gaffney had a catheter inserted into his heart through a vein in his arm. During the first few hours of flight, when the fluid shifts occur, they were able to measure the central venous pressure near Drew's heart. Once back to Earth, they did the same experiment to see if the measurement is different. The experiment showed that he experienced a much more rapid fall in central venous blood pressure than was predicted. This gives us information about the changes that occur when first entering weightlessness and diseases of earthbound patients. To properly prepare astronauts for spacewalking work in weightlessness requires astronauts, the tools they'll need, and a weightless environment in which to practice. The first two are easily come by, but here on Earth, the third is not. Through the years, NASA has used aircraft to briefly simulate weightlessness for astronauts and use the buoyancy of water to simulate the absence of gravity for longer periods of time. As NASA moves into the era of the International Space Station and the largest on-orbit assembly task ever attempted, a new tool was required, one that would create a more realistic simulation. That tool is the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory located at the Sonny Carter Training Facility near the Johnson Space Center in Houston. The centerpiece of the NBL is the swimming pool, 202 foot long, 102 foot wide and 40 foot deep, holding 6,200,000 gallons of water. The ground was broken for the 816,000 cubic foot tank on April 3, 1995, ultimately requiring the removal of 641,000 cubic feet of earth for the portion of the pool below ground level. Nearly 1,800 timbers were required to shore up the sides of that excavation. More than 2.6 million pounds of reinforced steel and 310 miles of steel tie wire went into the structure of the walls and floor. Then came the concrete, 5,300 cubic yards for the 6-foot thick floor, another 3,500 cubic yards for the 40-foot tall walls. By April 1996, the pool was ready to be filled with water. That required more than 6 million gallons of water, almost 26 tons, bringing the NBL's total weight of steel, concrete and water to more than 44,000 tons. The 6.2 million gallons of water are controlled to a temperature of approximately 85 degrees Fahrenheit to minimize the potential of hypothermia for support divers and are recycled every 19.5 hours by 4 pumps that move water in and out at a rate of 5,400 gallons per minute. The water treatment system also controls the chlorine, pH and conductivity levels to minimize long-term corrosion effects on training mock-ups and contaminant growth in the tank. Test subjects and the safety, utility and camera divers who assist them during test runs are supplied with an oxygen-enriched breathing gas to reduce the probability of experiencing decompression sickness after long periods at depth. Breathing gas as well as cooling water are supplied to the astronauts in their extravehicular mobility units through an umbilical, long enough to permit the astronauts access throughout the pool. A medical team is present to monitor the conditions of all personnel during a test, and a fully configured hyperbaric chamber is at poolside if an emergency treatment for the bends is needed. The facility houses the systems and engineering personnel to design, manufacture, test, assemble, maintain and store the mock-ups of space station components used during test runs. 2 10-ton overhead cranes, as well as the 1.6-ton jib cranes which raise and lower the suited subjects in and out of the water, are used to configure the mock-ups as required for each test. All support areas, essential during a training session, have a home at the NBL. Crew training, technical observers, facility operations, communications and video support. Video gathered from a complement of cameras mounted above and below the water and from handheld cameras operated by divers is provided for the trainers and simulation control teams. The voice communication system permits full two-way conversation between the astronauts and the test conductors at the facilities, as well as the flight control team at Mission Control and other astronauts participating in joint simulations at JSC's shuttle mission simulators. A series of underwater speakers allow one-way voice communications to the support divers assisting during the test. The MBL also provides full-scale working models of both the space stations and the space shuttle's remote manipulator systems. These models are operated hydraulically to improve durability and minimize safety concerns, while offering a realistic simulation of the use of robotic arm during spacewalk activities. Astronaut crews use the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory to train for space shuttle missions, as well as to prepare for the tasks that will be required to construct the International Space Station. In this facility, NASA teams verify proper development of on-orbit hardware. They develop flight procedures and refine spacewalk procedures to ensure the mission's success. The on-orbit assembly of the ISS will need hundreds of hours worth of such spacewalks. The ability to predictably perform those tasks is critical to success. The view from the space shuttle above the Earth. Right there is the Kennedy Space Center in the state of Florida, USA, where the shuttles are launched. This high perspective allows the astronauts to know exactly where they are. As the world's longest mountain range, the jagged line of the Andes frames the entire western side of South America. Many of the mountains you are seeing are active volcanoes. The lava they spew builds up the land, while glaciers and rainfall tear the land away. On the eastern side of South America, in Brazil, lies the vast Amazon rainforest, home to millions of species of animals and plants. As we fly over the forest, we can see that one of the largest smoke clouds ever produced hovers over it. The cloud comes from the trees that are being cleared and burned. The world's second largest continent, Africa, is next. As we fly over, the differences in the climate are easy to detect. On either side of the forest band lay the savannas, fertile grasslands of a more moderate climate and less rainfall. In the northern savanna region, space photography shows how natural changes have affected Lake Chad. Over the past 20 years, persistent drought has drastically lowered the lake's water level. Beyond the savannas, great deserts like the Sahara in northern Africa and the Kalahari in the mid and south consist of barren, rocky flats and wind-formed sand dunes. And there is the Nile River, the longest river in the world. Now we're passing over Europe and the Iberian Peninsula, where Columbus set sail to search for a water route to India. There's the boot of Italy kicking Sicily into the Mediterranean Sea. North of Italy, we can see the elegant arc of the Alps through France, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. The narrow Strait of Gibraltar. Spain is to the north, while Africa is to the south. The border between Europe and Asia. The largest inland sea, the salty Caspian Sea. To the east of the Caspian lies the Aral Sea, once the world's fourth largest lake before it started evaporating due to farmers diverting the water supply for cotton field irrigation. Moving northeast into Siberia, we encounter the comma shape of Lake Baikal. This enormous lake, the world's deepest, contains about 20% of all the world's fresh water. The frozen Kamchatka Peninsula at the eastern end of the former Soviet Union appears quiet, but it actually has a history of violent volcanoes and earthquakes. The volcanoes of Kamchatka are part of the Ring of Fire, a near-continuous string of volcanoes surrounding the edges of the Pacific Ocean. Far away are the snow-capped Himalayas in India and Pakistan, home to the highest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest. One more glimpse of Asia shows us the Sinai Peninsula, with the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, the Gulf of Suez and the Mediterranean Sea. Once these places fit together before our restless crust tore the region apart. On to the land down under, Australia, the smallest continent. The red that you see is the result of high iron content in the soil. To Australia's east lies the vast Pacific Ocean. It will take us about 20 minutes to cross the Pacific, even though we're travelling at about 8 kilometres per second. As we pass over the Pacific, we see Hawaii, one of the many islands that dot these immense waters. North America's next, and the San Andreas Fault that stretches almost 1,000 kilometres from Mexico through most of California and is, of course, the cause of frequent earthquakes in this part of the world. The state of Utah is home to the Great Salt Lake. The visible line is a railway causeway that interrupts the water's circulation, causing one side of the lake to be saltier than the other. On the east coast is Long Island in New York, formed a long time ago by a glacier. But not all of Earth's sights fulfill our expectations when seen from space. A geological wonder like the Grand Canyon in Arizona looks like a series of uninteresting lines from orbit, dramatically showing us how difficult it is to perceive depth from outer space. What does catch our eye is the White Sands Desert of New Mexico and the Mississippi Delta, which deposits the waters of the Mississippi River into the Gulf of Mexico. Here's another view of America as we view the lights of the cities of Jacksonville, Orlando and Tampa. That's a lot of electricity. So we've flown over North and South America, Africa, Europe and Asia, and Australasia. The only continent we didn't cover is, of course, Antarctica, because the shuttle doesn't travel that far south. This is Dante 2, an 8-legged walking machine shown here during field trials with its actions sped up. This robot has been designed to withstand and report on its journey to the floor of a volcano. It's built to endure Earth's harshest conditions. Its goal? To prove out technology to explore distant planets. Remotely controlled from over 100 kilometers away, the robot was able to investigate the inner depths of an active volcano at Mount Spur, Alaska. Spur's Goldera is an open pit of steaming vents surrounded by sheer walls of fractured rock. With help from the Alaskan National Guard, Dante was airlifted safely to the edge of the crater rim. Mount Spur's crater erupted in 1992. One of the robot's functions was to measure levels of volcanic gases. This information gives an idea of just how active the crater might be. In the past few years, 11 scientists have perished while working near active volcanoes. This danger makes robots an obvious alternative. Because of an ever-present danger of an explosion, scientists measured seismic activity and kept constant radio contact with the team on the crater rim. In 1993, the first Dante attempted to explore Mount Erebus in Antarctica. When its fiber optic communications cable snapped, the mission was cut short. But the mission taught them some valuable lessons. To improve its systems, major design changes had to be made quickly to keep the project on schedule. It was done with the help of experts in the fields of laser technology, telecommunications, computer software, and mechanical engineering. After power was supplied to the robot from a generator and all communications links were set, Dante was ready and the 8-legged craft began its assault on the crater. Special rubber snowshoes helped it traverse the first snowfields. Ultimately, Dante spent 3.5 days traversing the nearly 700 foot down to the crater floor, an area covered with boulders. Information from onboard sensors and video cameras was relayed via satellite to scientists in Anchorage. From their remote location, controllers used a computer-generated image created by a laser scanner to track its movement. In addition, they had a computer display which was in effect the robot's dashboard. That gave them feedback from all the onboard sensor systems. It told them when the legs were in contact with the ground, what angle they were at, and many more pertinent data. Dante also incorporates virtual reality technology. The system gives the user a feeling of being there. This same technology has been tested in a number of applications by NASA. Martian rover prototypes and underwater explorers have been remotely operated using 3D visual displays and specially censored gloves. Artificial intelligence allowed Dante to navigate on its own. Although the extremely treacherous terrain impeded Dante's climb from the crater, all science and technology objectives were achieved, indicating that the crater will probably remain inactive. It proved that exploring dangerous terrain was possible using unaided robotic technology. Having accomplished one short-term role with the successful descent into Mount Spur, the robot team hopes to apply the lessons learned to NASA's long-term plans for the future, moving the technology to the Moon, Mars, and other planets. That brings us to the end of this edition. We look forward to your company next time. But remember, we are out there. What we can and can't see is out there, and the mysteries between us, although seemingly insurmountable, are encompassed by a disappearing frontier.